Today we are going to be continuing our understanding within section 1.3. So far we focused a lot on factors or breaking down numbers. Today and moving forward we're going to transition our thinking now to start thinking about multiples or multiplying, making our numbers bigger. Okay, we're going to be able to use some of the same strategies we've used with finding greatest common factor and helping us solve for least common multiple here. So by the end of our notes and as we continue to practice a little bit more, our goal is to be able to find common multiples and the least common multiple of two whole numbers. As always, the vocabulary is listed here for you, and the vocabulary document is posted within our class notes folder. Today, words that we're going to be hearing are multiple, common multiple, and least common multiple. We can think about multiple as being another word to multiply. So let's put that next to our word for multiple. When we think about multiples, we're thinking about our multiplication facts of numbers. Okay. So our first or third learning objective here is to be able to find the common multiple of two whole numbers. So our job in this first example is we want to find the first two common multiples of 8 and 12. And our helpful hint here is that we want to list them. This is going to be our best strategy in finding the first two common multiples of our numbers, is just to list them out, just like we did with common factors, listing them out, see what matches up here. Okay, so if I start with 8, I have 8, and I want to go through my multiplication facts of 8. So 8 times 1, 8 times 2, 8 times 3, and continue listing until we find one that's also going to match with 12. So here as I start, my first common or my first multiple of any number is going to be the number itself. So 8. I'm going to skip count by 8 every time, so my next is going to be 16. Then I have 24. I have 32. And maybe we'll stop there and see if we have a matching pair with 12. So let's think about 12. I have 12 and 24. I can see right now that in my list I have 24 here and I have 24 and 12 as well. So that is going to be one of our first common multiples. Another strategy that we can use is once we first identify our first common factor, is we then can take that common multiple. We can take that common multiple, multiply it by 2, and that's going to give me my next one. So my hint over here is to find the first common multiple, then multiply by 2. So I'm going to take my 24 times 2 and I get 48, which is going to be my next one. And then we're done. So we found our first common multiple. We took that number and multiplied it by 2 to get our second common multiple. Let's keep this in mind and try out another example. Okay, find the first two common multiples of 3 and 5. So I want to start by listing my multiples of 3 and 5 to find the first one that matches up. So if I have 3, I have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21. We can probably stop there. Let's take a look at 5. I have 5, 10, 15, 20. So we're about at the same point. We can see in our list that we do have a common multiple here. I have 15 in my list for 3, as well as my list for 5. So I'm going to highlight that as my first common multiple between 3 and 5. My second step, if I think back to what we did in the first example, once we find the first common multiple, our job is then to multiply that by 2. So my next step is I need to take 15 times 2 to get 30. And I'm going to highlight that to show 30 is my second answer here. So our first two common multiples of 3 and 5 are 15 and 30. All right, let's look at one more example here. Find the first two common multiples of 7 and 11. So I'm going to start by listing my my multiples of 7. So I have 7, 14, 21, 28. Remember, I'm adding 7 every time I go to a new number, or I'm going through my multiplication facts of 7, 7 times 1, 7 times 2, 7 times 3, 7 times 4. I'm going to keep going. I have 35, 42, 49, 56, 63, 70, 77. Now I want to look at 11, 22, 33, 44, 55, 66, 77. So I can see here that 77 ends up being in both of my lists. That's my first common multiple. I'm now going to take 77 times 2 to get 154 as my second common multiple between 7 and 11. Okay, so when we're just finding the first 2 or 3, however many common multiples, using a list and then multiplying by 2 or 3 or whatever the question would be asking, that's going to be our strategy for finding the first common multiple here. The second half of this page is now looking at how to find the least common multiple, or the lowest, smallest. Our smallest common multiple between our two numbers. And in doing this, we can think back to our strategy or a method of using the ladder, which we've been working on with greatest common factor, and that can help us out here in finding our least common multiple. So let's do that. Let's use our ladder, starting with 6 and 9, finding our greatest common factor, or setting up our ladder here. So with 6 and 9, I want to think about what would be a common factor of 6 and 9 that I can divide by. 1 is a common factor of everything we're going to skip past. 2 isn't going to work here with 6 and 9. If I think about 3, 3 is going to work. I can take 6 divided by 3 and get a whole number, same as 9 divided by 3 and get a whole number. So we're going to factor out our 3. And then I do my division, 6 divided by 3, 9 divided by 3. I'm left with 2 and 3. At this point, I know I'm done factoring. 2 and 3 are both prime numbers. I cannot factor any more. So this step, this process, we should be familiar with this. We've used that to find the greatest common factor. However, this is where we add in an extra step here in being able to solve for our least common multiple. What we are going to do to solve for least common multiple is we're going to make almost like an L shape. That's going to be easy to remember for least common multiple, an L. And we're going to make this L from everything on the outside of our ladder or our box. So our 3 and our 2 and our 3, we're going to multiply all of these numbers together to get our least common multiple. So 3 times 2 times 3, that L shape on the outside of my ladder. And when I do 3 times 2 times 3, I get the answer of 18. So 18 is my least common multiple of 6 and 9. Okay, let's try another one. We have 18 and 24. I could factor out a 2. When I do that, I get 9 and 12. For 9 and 12, I could factor out 3. I get 3 and 4. 3 and 4 don't have any other common factors besides 1. 3 is prime. So now I'm going to make my L shape with my numbers on the sides and the numbers at the bottom. And we're going to multiply these together to get our least common multiple. So I have 2 times 3 times 3 times 4. You can use a calculator to plug those in. And when we do that, our least common multiple comes out to be 72. And the third example here of 5 and 12. If we think about what kinds of numbers we have here, 5 is prime and 12 is composite. So if I have one prime number, that means 5's only factors are 1 and 5, that there's not going to be anything else in common with 12. So when we have that, where we have one prime and one composite, we aren't going to do our ladder because we have no more steps that we can take. Instead, we're just going to multiply our two numbers together. So I'm going to take 5 times 12 to get 60. 5 is prime, 12 is composite. If we want to add that note to ourselves. That tells us that we just have to multiply them together to get our least common multiple. All right, we have one more problem on here, and it is a word problem. Let's see if I can fit it all here. So, a red light flashes every 14 minutes. Let's highlight that as an important number for us. 14 minutes, and a blue light flashes every 24 minutes. If they flashed together at 8 a.m., when will the two lights flash at the same time again? So this type of word problem is having us think about something in the future or our numbers getting bigger. So that is going to help us in being able to identify this as a least common multiple answer. So let's make a note for ourselves that in this problem, we're thinking about the future. So that equals LCM. We're not dividing into groups, which would be greatest common factor. We're looking ahead into the future. Okay, so I'm going to use my ladder in in being able to solve and find my least common multiple of my two numbers. So for this problem, it's 14 and 24. I'm going to draw my ladder and start factoring. 14 and 24 are both even numbers, so I could factor out a 2. When I do that, I'm left with 7 and 12. I'm going to look now. I have 7 and 12. 7 is prime. 12 is composite. I have one of each, so that means I'm at my stopping point. I cannot factor any more. When I find my least common multiple starts with L, so I need to take my numbers in the L shape, and I'm going to multiply those together. So 2 times 7 times 12. If I were to plug those into the calculator, 2 times 7 times 12, I get the answer of 168. So that means after 168 minutes, these two lights are going to flash at the same time. What we need to do now is we need to figure out what time is it going to be in 168 minutes. If they flashed together at 8 o'clock a.m., 168 minutes later, what time is it going to be? So 168 minutes, if we're going to break this up into hours and minutes, 1 hour equals 60 minutes. 2 hours, if I was to add another 60, would equal 120 minutes. 3 hours would be 180 minutes. So looking here, I only want to figure out for 168. So we know at least 1 hour has passed. We know at least 2 hours have passed. But how many more minutes then to get to 168 minutes? 120 of this equals 2 hours. So if we were to subtract, we're left with 48 minutes. So it's 2 hours and 48 minutes later. Almost done. At 8 a.m., I'm now going to add 2 hours and 48 minutes. To figure out that the two lights are going to flash together again at 10:48 a.m. So that ends up being our final answer, 10:48 a.m. We figured out how much time would pass for them to meet again. We have to use then this minutes, our amount in minutes, to figure out truly what time is that going to be. If I add 168 minutes to 8 o'clock a.m., what time is it going to be? Okay. So at this point, we should have all of our problems filled in. If you need to go back and hear any of this again, please feel free to watch the video. If everything is complete, then you may go ahead and submit your notes to the assignment on Schoology. We will be doing more practice with this in class this week. Please come ready with questions and ready to work. Thank you.